lose composure. And always listen. Because they're always listening too. Good evening and welcome to the Nightmares. I'm Rhett.
And I'm Bee.
And, I guess it's kind of like a welcome back sort of episode, really. I think the last episode we've had recorded, which was a two-parter, that was... I don't even think it was June. I think it might have been early June, late May, something
End
like
of
that. It was a
May.
long time ago.
It was the
Oh
end
my
of May we
God, yeah.
recorded it.
Jesus Christ, it's nearly been 2 months. So, what's happened between then and now is I had my jab early June, and after 24 hours, I got immediately ill, and then my mum came down for a week after that, and then I think at some point, B, did you get ill? Like, 'cause I remember telling you I had the flu again. Like, I got ill a second time
Yeah.
within a month.
Oh shit. Sorry, things are falling over. Yeah.
It's all right.
You were ill, and then I was ill because we were meant to record that week, and then I think I went away to do some testing and stuff, and we haven't had a window to really record since until today.
Yeah, because I also took 2 weeks off. Well, I'm still almost 2 weeks off. I went to Kent for a week, and then I had to recover because I was ill during the holiday as well. I think a lot of people are just getting like really, really sick because not just corona, it's also the flu. It's like, yeah, it sucks. And you just had your jab as well, haven't you? So
Yes, yesterday.
yeah, I think we're both pretty much in fatigue, but we had to like get going again. So here we are.
Yeah.
So thanks for everyone's patience. I hope you enjoyed the double parter. I enjoyed editing the intro and the outro of that. I don't know if you heard that yet, B. It's really good.
Yes.
Yeah, I was excited. Yeah, it was awesome, the ending. But so in the last episode, I do remember promising that there was more of a manga based,
I know.
or like an art based one.
Unfortunately, we're not doing
Yeah,
that this time.
no, because both of us just didn't have time to really put research into it, and that's another thing I'll need to go into at the end of the episode as well. But I thought, as I've watched A Quiet Place Part 2 twice in the last month, um, I just thought, like, because those movies are like really, really great, and it's a great series, and I got B to watch that as well, and thank you, B, for doing that because I couldn't find the first one. So you've watched this. You've watched the first one recently.
I watched the first
I
one,
watched the
but
second
I
one
couldn't
recently.
get my hands on the second one.
Well, yeah, because it's still in theaters, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past you if you couldn't find it. I just happened to seen it twice, and I couldn't find the first one. So there's going to be a lot of me remembering the first one, and then you just having to listen to me talk about the second one. But yeah, A Quiet Place is a horror franchise. It started in 2018 with the very first one, and the reason I wanted to bring it up because not only have I seen the second one and remember the first one, I just think they're both really interesting films, and I think they show a new flair to the horror genre that we don't really see that often, and we'll go into that. But so we'll talk about the first one, and then I'll briefly talk about the second one because there's really not much to get. Like, it's all the same concept. So the beginning is the plot is that there's a family that's going through a post-apocalyptic world where it's been invaded by creatures that are completely blind, but they have an incredible acute sense of hearing, and they can hear a pin drop from like miles away. Any sort of movement you create, any noise that you make, they will hunt you down and they'll kill you instantly. And the story is kind of centered around that as the family. Um, so I can't remember all the names. So it's John Krasinski, who plays Lee Abbott, who's the father, and then he's also the director as well.
And I think
And
he
for
co-wrote it
those who
as
watch,
well.
yeah, so he co-wrote it as well. There was two other writers that were in league with writing it, and he, for those who watch The Office, he's Jim Halpert, which is really really funny to me because every time I see him in a horror film, I just think of that face that he makes towards the camera, like every time in The Office. And
Yeah.
he is so jarring, but of course he's grown a beard now, so I can take him a little bit seriously. And then there was Emily Blunt, who plays the wife,
Hmm.
and they're both married in real life, and I was going to go into that later. And then there's the children. I think it's John something Reagan plays the son, and then there's also uh, Millicent Simmons, who's actually deaf in real life. It was her second ever film that she's ever done, and there was also a third child, which I can't remember, and we'll go into that. And also, there's obviously spoilers and everything. You know, we're going to go into this into a lot of detail. So, the majority of the film is just this family, you know, surviving in this world. Um, there's really, in terms of the story, it's not much to it than that, but it's really more about how they portray the horror in the film. That's what makes it so interesting. So the greatest, I think, one of the strongest key points about this is that majority of the film is silent.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hibby, as you've seen it recently. I don't think there is a single bit of dialogue in the film until like 40 minutes in,
It's
for a
close
very
to
long
that. It
time.
is very close to that. I think the first actual dialogue you see is between the dad and the little boy when they're at the river. And that's the first dialogue that you actually have, people actually talking to each other. That's not just sign language.
Oh yeah, that's true. So there's a lot of because again, like these creatures, again they can hear literally anything, and
Mm.
they'll just pick up where you are without even seeing you. So there's a lot of sign, like because the daughter, I think Reagan Abbott, she she she's deaf as
Yeah.
she is in real life, the actor. So they she uses a lot of sign language, which the family knows as well, and that's how they communicate.
Mm.
And what's really interesting about that is it makes it very important. It really keeps you glued to the screen. So, say, because sometimes when you watch horror films and you can hear it, so you don't really, you can be on your phone or something like that whilst the film's watching. But when you watch A Quiet Place, you have to watch the screen, otherwise you have no idea what they're saying to each other. You miss out on all the communication and everything that's going on in it.
Yeah, it is. It's really a film that
It's
requires your concentration.
absolutely, and there's a lot of like body language as well between actors. So the writers have actually were inspired by silent films and using that as the premise for A Quiet Place as well. It's really, really, like, I just find it's really, really intense, and I think it also shows how good the casting were, because without dialogue, as an actor, like without dialogue, like you're only limited to your body, so you need to have a lot of physicality in your role in order to communicate. And although sign language is just like the shifting of hands to, you know, indicate words and what you're trying to convey, like it's still very strong. That becomes more and more like, I think in the second one, it's there's more of that. Um, So I think that's one of the strongest features, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, is the silence in this movie. And any use of noise would make you jump or scare the hell out of you. And one of the most intense things about the plot is, um, whilst in the beginning of the film they do lose one child, I think that kid was deaf as well. I think because I remember in the second one, Emily Blunt's character was giving sign language to the youngest son, and then I think he had a toy or something that he really wanted, and then that led to
Well,
the child's death, which is sad.
that's one of the other interesting things is the use of sign language that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, please go
Other than
ahead.
sound stuff,
Yeah.
but we can get into that in a minute. I don't think the youngest one, that the one that they lost, was deaf, or at least if he was, it wasn't clarified through the course of the film. It was more just the whole
Okay.
family knew sign language to accommodate the fact that one of their children was deaf, which kind of becomes
Okay.
it becomes a very big priority when you are interacting with someone who can't hear you, to learn that and to be accommodating, because that's what they need. But sign language as a whole, I thought was interesting in its use because, well, yes, it was good. I don't think that they did a massive amount of justice to it, because sign language isn't just your hand movements. Sign language as a language heavily accommodates what you do with your face as well, and how your face interacts with those two. But I feel like that's more like for a film, they've done really good in using it, and also using something that the little girl, the end of the thing that she could hear was the static whenever those creatures came near, and using that towards the end. That was quite interesting. But I would have liked to have seen maybe a more in-depth, how do I say it, like a more in-depth use of sign language for what it is as well.
I'm trying to think. Like in terms, I think it's more or less the same sort of delivery in the second one. But again, I can't remember the first one too well in terms of how the sign language is used. So if you ever see the second one, you can make that comparison.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a lot more to it, but in terms of the film, I mean, I suppose there's only so much they could get away with the sign language, because you gotta have you got to kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but like you got to compromise, I suppose. But another thing, of course, that what makes it really intense in terms of the sound is also that Emily Blunt is pregnant in the film, and she gives birth to a baby. And with babies, as we all know, they cry a lot. They make a lot of noise, against, beyond their control. So imagine having a baby in a world filled with monsters that, as soon as you hear a pin drop, they are on you.
Mm.
So that makes it even more intense. Like, not only is this family, like, some of them are deaf, or at least one of the children is deaf, but also they have a baby that could compromise their safety at all times, and they're not just going to abandon it. It's part of the family. It's a baby. In fact, what they did was really clever, and is that they had the basket and they rigged it so they have like an oxygen canister, and a tube feeds into the lid of the basket, so the child can breathe but also be muffled, like muted at the same time, which is quite clever. Except you're going to need oxygen at some
Yeah.
point, otherwise, like, no matter where you are, they'll hear you. And I thought that made it even more intense, as well.
Definitely. I think as
And
well the creatures themselves and how they're portrayed are really unsettling, because that's all you can hear. That those are the biggest things you can hear. You can hear her give birth, and you can hear those things moving.
oh yeah, that's
Mm.
correct. Yeah, so so they had to take a lot of. I mean, they've clearly planned it, Like from what I can remember, like they've had all this time to play because they knew that also just giving birth alone it's going to be very painful,
Mm.
and you're not going to be able to you can't just tell someone who's pregnant like to shut up, like someone's going to kill us, like you know
Yeah.
what I mean. You're passing a human being out of you, so that you're going to scream. So all those things, like it's really cool that they considered that, and that made just the film like even more intense because you don't want obviously you don't want the baby to die, you don't want any of the family to die. So I'm kind of glad that they chose a family as like the centerpiece of how we see the world. But we'll go into that a little bit later. As you mentioned, the creatures are also really scary, and I think that it's not their official name, but they're known as the Death Angels, which I believe was on a newspaper clipping in the film, and that's what
Hmm.
people call them. Some interesting trivia about the creatures themselves, like Industrial Light and Magic, I believe, helped design them and make these special effects in the film. The they're like a combination of various things. They're like I think they're called like bogmen or something. Basically, cadavers, like corpses that have been like buried in like peat or
Oh,
something like that. So it gives
yeah.
them
I
that
know what that is.
black leathery look. Which, if you see the creatures, they have that, don't they? They have
They
that.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, that livery physique. That's where they got the idea from, as bogmen, and they're also their anatomy is an amalgamation of like several creatures. I believe a gorilla is one because if you recall, like the Death Angels have like really long gangly arms, which are absolute. What scare me about them is when they just jump and they just fucking whack people, like they just slap them.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's just like, whoosh. Or do you remember there was that rabbit or something that was just hopping along like quietly, and then it made one little noise, and all of a sudden that big old hand just comes and
Mm.
just slams
I think it
it.
was a raccoon.
Oh, it was a oh
I think
no,
so.
that's sad.
I know raccoons are great.
Why? Yeah, why? What have they ever done to these creatures? Like kill the humans. I don't care, but don't leave the raccoons out of it, man. They're like neutral. They're like conscientious objectors, man. They don't
Mm.
want any conflict. Oh, now I'm really sad.
Sorry.
Right, I've got to talk and move. Yeah, why would you bring that up? Oh
I'm
no!
sorry.
All right, let's move on before I cry.
Okay.
Yeah, but like they have the gangly arms, and I think they also have like resemblances of a bat as well. And I can't remember why that is. I think it's just the way that they're.
Well, I think it
I
could be
think
to
it's
do with
just a
like the
shape.
echolocation and the way that they move, like how they
Oh,
jump with their
and the
arms out, is almost
blindness bat. Yeah.
reminiscent of like the movement of wings.
Yeah, that they're trying to fly, but the most they could do is jump. Really. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that does make sense actually. Yeah, because you're right. When they jump, they like the arms just lunge
The
out.
arms go out
You know
like
what I
to
mean?
the sides and then in, which kind of, if you look at like how wings on some animals move, is very not even like very similar, but almost like how you swim, and swimming in flight is almost a very similar movement.
Oh, okay. But that's really funny because in the second one, it's revealed that they can't swim
Oh,
at all. That's like
Jesus.
one of the only. That's one of the only weaknesses they have. Because I remember like there was this. I'll go into it later, but there
Mm.
was like a scene at the docks where they're like one of them tries to jump on a boat because it knows it's there, and then he just about misses and just falls in the water and just drowns like a big dumb idiot. He just didn't know what to do. He was like, "Oh no, I guess I'm sinking." Well, that's it for me. See you later, guys. Um, but yeah, they can't swim. But another thing, which is really really interesting, and I don't know where you can find it, but of course, there's a lot of interviews with John Krasinski about how the film was made, and one of the things that he talks about is the actual world that they live in.
Yeah.
He doesn't go into full depths, but basically, in the world is much more fierce and violent than it is on Earth, and also the gravity is much more dense. Probably there's like I don't think they have a sun that it can revolve around. Hence why they don't have eyes because they don't need them because they've kind of evolved enough to use like incredible
Yeah, the
um,
echolocation.
echolocation, yeah. So that's why, like, when they're on Earth, like, that's why they, even though they have like these big gangly arms and they're meant to have like really strong armor. That's what that livery skin is. It's like really strong. So it's really impossible to like shoot them and hurt them. Like, that's why they jump around so lightly, because the density on their planet is much more than it is on Earth. So they could just that's why they're able to run and jump around, even though their arms, I think, extend further than the legs. So most of the time they could just like, I don't think they ever use their legs, actually, to be fair. I think they're quite useless. They just use their arms for everything, like to move around and to attack and stuff.
And the way that they
And
move, I think in some scenes you see like the running, or they'll go up on their back legs, which I think is again where like the gorilla anatomy comes in, and how they
yeah,
definitely in how they run, and then how they like leer back when they're like listening.
that's interesting. They probably watched like a lot of like nature documentaries and stuff like that to get the characteristics right as well. What's really disturbing, and I can't remember if you see this. You must see this in the first one. Is like how they hear. So basically, you got the head, and of course they have no eyes, but like they have. I think they have like parts of their skull can like move in and out,
Yeah,
and it's kind of like a cabbage sort of way. It's kind of weird, like how those layers could just like unfold so they can hear like in
it's
every direction.
like leaves of skin almost that like palpitate out.
Yeah,
Very creepy.
yeah, that's
Very creepy.
it
Very
is
cool.
very it is very cool though, especially like when you get a lot of scenes where they're kind of slowly, when it's like they're kind of like they heard something but they can't hear anything, so they're just kind of like prowling around, and they got like the little things coming out and they can hear in every direction. It's really bizarre.
I always find those scenes not even like the most jarring, but in watching how it moves was a bit unsettling to me anyway.
Oh, yeah, you get that a lot, especially when like, because they could be quiet too. That's the thing, because they know to be quiet, because their whole dependency on killing others is using sound. So if they're quiet, then they know that if once a mistake is heard, they know it's not any of them. They'll just go straight for it and just whoosh, just slap him into next year, you know. But yeah, I thought that was really cool, and I'm sure there's like more trivia about the creatures, but I just thought I'd bring that up because it's always like when it comes to like monsters in movies, I always like to know how they're made or like the concept behind them.
Yeah, the inspiration to it.
Yeah, inspiration is always quite interesting. And a funny trivia, when they were, I think they were like, pardon me, when they were showing this, like a preview of it, like an unedited, like not a fully edited version of it to the audience, like they found that the audience was laughing when there's no funny scenes like in the film, like it wasn't a comedy, and they were really worried that the film was actually not good. But as it turns out, like the motion capture for the creatures, they haven't edited the creature in. It's actually John Krasinski. He does some of the motion capture of the creature. So he was in this little green suit or whatever with balls attached to him. Yeah, that's why they were laughing, because it wasn't edited in.
Oh, that's
so once
brilliant.
they've done that, yeah, they showed the edited footage in, and then people thought it was really good. Yeah, but I thought that was so. I wish there's. It might be on. I might get a Blu-ray if there's actual footage of that, because that sounds so funny. Like,
that would be glorious.
because all I'm thinking is like Jim Halpert in The Office doing a film with like Michael Scott, like just like that Threat Level Midnight film that they did in that show. If you haven't seen The Office, then I really recommend that as well.
I haven't seen The Office.
Oh, you have to see it. You have to see it. It's probably a prequel to The Quiet Place, to be honest. Like, Jim Halpert was just like working in a paper company, and then these creatures attacks, and then it could work.
He changed his name, married Emily Blunt, and was on the run from monsters.
Oh yeah. So yeah, Pam's out, Emily Blunt's in. But speaking of which, actually, I wanted to talk about the like the family side, because I thought that was also very strong. Like,
Mm.
um, so yeah, I think what made it really real for me is, again, like I mentioned, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are together in real life, and in fact, there is a lot of like family photos that are real as well, like them and their actual kids used in the film. And because of their bond and what it's like to have children, I think they gelled very well with the children, the children cast,
Mm.
um, and it just makes it all the more believable and all the more gripping that you kind of want to see them through it, especially so early into the film. They had already had a loss in the family, and not to mention they have a birth of a new one, which could, which could kill the family at any given moment. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like a lot of like you could feel that stress, like you could feel that tensity that they would feel, and yeah, I just thought that was. I'm really glad that they just made it as like a family and not like a group of random survivors,
I
because
kind
I
of,
don't think
yeah.
that would play very well.
It also added a really beautiful
Um,
simplicity to the situation
yeah,
and to how it was recorded. In that you don't have, call it, five separate characters each vying for a moment of screen time to tell their backstory. You have a family. Their story is inexplicably intertwined, and there is no escaping that. So, however you cut it, you can tell a very simple story using that dynamic. Because the concept of the movie is strikingly easy to wrap your head around, but it's
yeah.
portrayed so well.
That's what I find. Like when I tell you the story, it doesn't seem like much, but it's with stories, it's not always what the story is; it's how it's told,
How it's presented to
and like
you,
it's
yeah.
yeah, and that's why I just thought it was interesting, because there's not really, like in recent memory, that there's not a lot of films in my mind that have tried to do a very quiet, um like a quiet horror, so to
Mm.
speak, like a silent film horror, going back to like the old days. Um, and I'm really glad it was a quiet place as well. Can you imagine? I was just thinking like the other day, like imagine if it was the opposite, where you had to make a lot of noise all the time.
Bro, I could not have watched that at
And
2 in the morning if it was that
no,
busy. I think that would
I
have
mean, I
freaked me
don't
out
think I'd
more.
watch it. I think it would just be annoying. It would just be like an hour and a half of just noise.
Mate, I
It
wouldn't be able
wouldn't.
to
It wouldn't
sleep
be
after that.
intense. Yeah, exactly. It would have been uh, like, I don't know what it's like. Instead of a quiet place, it'd be like a loud. I don't know, a loud something, a loud inconvenience. That's what it would be, because that's what that film would have been. Just like a family just yelling for like 90 minutes, and then they all stop for a second. And like, oh no, they found us!
Yeah.
You just get like completely mollered. Um, but yeah, so the use of sound, or that lack thereof, family and death angels. I think in terms of the first film. Oh yeah, and also one last thing, and I think it's really important to bring up, was again Millicent Simmons,
Mm.
who plays Reagan Abbott, the daughter. Again, she was, she's deaf in real life, so the hearing aid that she has is real as well. She was like, I think the, I think I wouldn't say underrated. Maybe I wouldn't say that. But something along that line. She was like she was kind of like the surprise in the film, I guess. Like, because I thought the actor was really really good. At playing her role, although I guess it would become a bit more natural to her. But also, like, she invents a great weakness in the creatures, is like, which I believe was feedback, or like the, like having too much noise, because that it messes up with their ears and they can't. It makes them like sound blind, I guess, if that's
Yeah.
even a word you would use.
Well,
But
I'd
yeah,
say it's
it
like the
messes with their
equivalent
sense.
of like throwing a flash bomb at someone. It does. It like blinds them for a minute because it's
Yeah,
overwhelming.
yeah. So she like so, and I just thought that was really, and it was a hearing aid as well.
Mm.
Like the one thing that she depends on to hear everything around the world is the one thing that actually defeats these creatures that rely solely on sound. And I thought that was an interesting theme in which she'd use. And she was really good. In fact, she took more of a role in the second one because unfortunately in the film, Lee Abbott, like the father, dies, a sacrifice to save his family, and then she kind of like slowly takes on his role, which you'll see in the second one. But overall, like, what do you think your thoughts are, like, having seen the first one? Like,
Uh, it's a kind of a mixed bag. I was very impressed with it as a
hmm,
concept for a film. I like that the way that they took the story, something so simple, and they warped it into this very interesting plot point. I didn't really notice time passing when I was watching it until like we got halfway through and I had to pause and I was like, oh shit, we're near the end. Um,
hmm,
so from that perspective, fantastic. It was really gripping. It kept my attention the whole time. I didn't feel scared so much as I just felt really fucking bad for them the whole way through because that
yeah,
is an awful situation to end up in. The characters were really relatable on like a deeply personal
oh,
level. I feel like anyone could watch that movie and
yeah,
find someone that they could relate to, be it the mum teaching her son his is it divisional maths, whatever she was teaching him whenever she was trying to talk to him and he didn't want to go with the dad out fishing, you know? How she
oh
interacted with
yeah,
that, that was a really sweet, really well done moment. That kind of solidifies the bonds within the family. That was really nice. Um, the little girl
yeah.
was probably my favorite character in the whole thing. Um,
I would, I would say mine too. And then Lee Abbott would be a second, I think, because they're both kind of like leading characters. I
mm,
find, and then when he went, she, like I said, she kind of takes his mantle, proceeding forward.
yeah, but definitely I wouldn't like the. I can't really fault it as far as the film goes. It has a bit of everything, and it uses, like you said, it uses audio really well, or the lack of audio really well, to create this kind of haunting scenery. And it is haunting because you're used to hearing people talking. You're used to hearing kids laughing and kids playing, and even from the get go, where you have the silence of the little boy drawing the rocket on the floor. Normally, kids, they hum, they talk to themselves, they talk to other things, they talk to their toys, they do. Everything has a dialogue pattern to it, and to suddenly remove that just leaves this like deeply unsettling feeling, which is pretty damn good. If that's what you're going for, it's pretty damn good. Um,
Yeah,
but I
and
thoroughly
not to
enjoyed it.
mention, yeah, and I think John Krasinski, like, he's not known for horror, as you
Mm.
know. Like he's mainly done comedy for most of his career. Like to take this on, like never doing horror before, and not only to direct it but to star in it as well. I don't think he has a lot of experience in horror. He's done very well.
I think
The
he's
cast has done
matured.
very well.
He's matured really well as an actor. Like I said, I haven't seen The Office, but I've seen the memes, so I know what kind of went on. But he matured into that role phenomenally, and like really took on the role of like, I mean, I know you said he's a parent in real life. He's married to Emily Blunt, and I think he's just taken all that experience to like give the best performance he could, which was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I think they all did a really good performance. Like I said, like because they were like they know what it's like to have a family, and they know what it's like to have that urgency to protect their children, especially in this kind of world,
Mm.
and like that really conveys well, like to the audience, like as well. Like I said, if it wasn't a family, if it was just like a random group of strangers that just band together in this chaos,
Oh,
then
they'd all be dead
I
by the
don't
end of the
think I would
movie.
care. They'll be dead
Like,
anyway. Yeah, as soon as one of them goes, "What the hell's going on?" That's it. They're all
mm,
dead anyway.
gone for. And I don't think the communication would
That,
have worked as smoothly. Like, this again comes back to the communication point. I know I said obviously there's some faults with how it's presented, but you have a family who has learned sign language because one of their children cannot hear them. That is paramount to her existence as a happy human being. So of course they can communicate seamlessly because they've been doing it their whole lives. Since she came into the world, they've been doing it, which is amazing. Whereas if you had a group of strangers, how much time would we sit watching that movie and watch them write notes to each other? Like, that's what it would be.
oh
It would
my
be fucking
god.
passing notes between each other to try and
I'm
understand. It would be painful.
I'm I mean, I'm kind of glad that they don't do that in the well, in the actual film itself. That'd be, like you said, that'd be painful. We should do that as a joke, like a parody. Them just like doing all the worst things you could do in a silent horror is just writing notes and using Etch and Sketch. Although that will make a noise and you're dead then, aren't you? It's
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean.
I will say
Just
for what
using like,
they did use words on though, the newspaper, anything he had written down, things on it made it so much more impactful as well. Because you're forced to watch and concentrate on the dialogue on a screen as it's happening and how they're communicating. You take in more, I think, of the picture. Because like you said, if you don't have to look at the screen, you could be on your phone, you could be playing a game, you could be reading something. And then you miss something, and later on you see like a newspaper cutout, and you're like, what is that? Whereas because you're focusing on what's happening so much with the dialogue coming up on the screen, newspaper cutouts, anything that he wrote down, finding a weakness, it becomes that much more prominent to you.
exactly.
I think that's just a
But yeah,
stylistic,
overall,
really just like
I would give
stylistics of
this.
the film.
Yeah, that's cool. I like stuff like that too. But I would give this film like an 8, honestly, just because it was refreshing and it had a very strong cast and they handled this relatively unfamiliar concept in the modern horror industry very well. So it was kind of like a neo silent horror film in a way. And to be honest, I don't think there'll be many of these because I don't think people would be able to handle it, like to tackle it very well. Or well, except of course the sequel, which is what we'll go into now. So, you haven't seen it, B, so I'll just explain
Yeah, by all means.
the story here, and I'll give like a brief summary. So, A Quiet Place Part 2, although it actually starts on the very first day of the invasion, I think, one, it was just to show what it was like, and also two, it was meant to introduce a new character who's played by Cillian Murphy, who does very well in the role, actually. I mean, although he doesn't personally, like, he doesn't do much, but he does whatever he does well in the film. But yeah, so the beginning of the film, the first few minutes, is set in the very first day, like when they arrive. In fact, you'll like the family's at a baseball game, all of them all the family together, and then as the game went on, there was like meteors, like kind of falling from the sky and crashing into Earth, and then that's when, of course, the creatures start attacking, and you basically see the family just kind of going through the struggle. And it had a lot of in the intro alone, it had like a really cool scene which plays more on the silence thing. So basically, with this film, they get to expand on things. So in the first one, I'm not sure if they ever did this with Millicent Simmons, but we get to be like, the director calls it like her envelope, where we kind of hear the world from her perspective. So, for example, when we first see the creature, it basically knocks down like a police car, and John Krasinski's like running away, getting into the car. The daughter Reagan is already in the car, and we hear it from her perspective, which basically is like really muffled, and she can't hear the explosions or anything that's going on. and it's really, really intense, like, because there's things going on, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of panic, and she doesn't know what's going on. And it was really interesting. In fact, the mother of the actor actually complimented John Krasinski on that scene, because for the first time she gets to experience what it's like to be in her daughter's shoes,
Yeah.
which also made the director cry as well, which it is quite sweet actually, that he included that in the film, that we actually get to be in her envelope, as he calls it. And that happens quite a few times throughout the film, especially when in the opening scene she's like running on her own, and there's like a lot of explosions and stuff, and we can't hear anything. And I thought that was really interesting. And also, and then after the opening scene, it goes immediately after the first one. Like it literally continues like seconds afterwards.
Mm.
So we didn't mention it before, but most of the film takes place in like a farm, which they've kind of made a home for themselves in order to give birth to the baby and to try and start a normal life. And then of course, someone makes a noise, the whole place gets like invaded. But at the end of the film, like once we've discovered the weakness that like using the hearing aid to cause feedback is, like they use that against the aliens, and then Emily Blunt has a really cool scene with a shotgun where she's like blowing all their heads off.
Yeah.
And then it follows immediately after that. So the remaining family band together, and this is where we start to see Millicent Simmons become basically almost like the lead. I think Emily Blunt really and Cillian Murphy took the lead in this film, but she was kind of dominating the role a little bit more as the lead in there. So she takes the amp that she uses against, like, to cause the feedback, and then she starts trying to find other outposts, like other settlements, and then she eventually finds one, so they all go over there. And again, they trigger off a trap, makes a noise, and they all run away. And then the kid we don't talk about, I can't remember his name. He was like the eldest son. He's kind of like a wimpy character. He was kind of like that in the first one, and he's definitely like that in the second one. He's kind of the scaredy cat sort of one, where his sister's kind of the brave, heroic one. He gets like caught in a bear trap as he's running, and again the use of noise, like, because they were quietly running the whole time, and then he does this blood curdling scream because he's in so much pain from the bear trap, and like the mother's just trying to keep him shut because he's gonna kill them all. It's scenes like that. Like normally, like it's bad when you see that in a horror film. You think, oh, that sucks, but because there's the pain and the noise, there's always an element of danger to that. So that still carries on from the first film, and really there's no fault with it at all. And then that's when we get introduced again to Cillian Murphy's character, who at this point, after kind of going through, because he had children, they're gone as well, he had a wife who got killed because she made too much noise while she was in a lot of pain, and there was nothing he could have done about it. Yeah. He's become more of a reclusive character. He's kind of more pessimistic now. He has no hope left in the world. He's kind of like how a lot of people are after going through, I think in terms of the timeline, it's been over a year, because Emily Blunt was pregnant during that time and she had the kids, so it was over a year, and in that time he's become sort of like very pessimistic, and he thinks that this is just the world the way it is and there's no hope for any of them. So what he does is he wants the family to leave. They could stay the night, but he wants them out of there because it's going to cause too much trouble. And then this is where we sort of see three in like simultaneous storylines happening at once. So the main storyline is um, Reagan Simmons has been listening to the radio to try and find some sort of sign of life, basically, and she hears a song on an actual song being played, and it's actually like a code. So basically, the transmission was coming from an island where, as I mentioned before, monsters can't swim. So basically, it's a haven, and she wants to go there on her own. Her brother tries to convince her otherwise, but she goes on her own. And this is where we start to see her taking like the heroic sort of lead, like, you know, the leader sort of thing. Um, and then she almost gets killed while she's in like an abandoned train because she can't hear the creatures as well. Like, she just happens to see it coming towards her, and she's trying to use a shotgun, but because she's so small, she doesn't know how to use it. She starts fumbling, and then Cillian Murphy kills it, and they both join together to try and find that haven. So that's one storyline. The second one, these two are kind of like secondary, and I don't think they're as impactful. Is the wife, Emily Blunt. She goes to find more oxygen canisters for the baby, and not much really happens with her storyline at the time. She's kind of just, she goes back to the bridge where her youngest son died, because they left a little memorial there, like a little cross, like exactly where he died in the first film. And she leaves her wedding ring on top of that as well. So it's become like a family memorial thing because her husband died in the first one. And then the third one is the kid's left on his own with the baby. He was told not to leave this because basically what it is, it's like there's like, it's basically they're in like a factory or something, and there's like this underground bit where, other than if they're entirely on top of you, like the death angels, it's completely soundproof. And there's also like this chamber that they can go in, which also it doesn't have much oxygen, so you can't stay in there too long, but it makes it even more soundproof as well. So the kid, all he had to do was look after the baby, make sure it doesn't make any noise, and what he does is he decides to go up the little ladder thing, goes into the factory and starts wandering around. He sees his corpse, gets startled, and jumps into like something, and it causes a lot of racket. And then a monster comes, and then the whole of his storyline is basically trying to get away from this one creature. You know, I mean, it's just like a lot of a lot of his storyline eventually merges with Emily Blunt's role, because she comes back and realizes, oh, there's a creature here. So that whole storyline is like so unavoidable, but they have to like give these like the cast screen time, don't they? So they had to do something, because the majority of the film is centered around Cillian Murphy and Millicent Simmons finding a settlement.
Yeah.
So in terms of the storyline, like, it's pretty weak, but they had to think of something, right? I suppose. But going back into another thing we don't really get to see much in the first one was more people. So, for example, I mentioned that there was a docks in the second one. Mm-hmm. So they go there to get a boat because they need to cross the water to get to the island. They find a bunch of boats, and they find a little girl stranded on her own on the bay. So Cillian Murphy goes up to her and is like, "Are you okay? You okay?" And it turns out like she's part of like this, like, basically a bunch of like some, I don't know what to call them, some evil group. She had a noose in her hand and ties it around him, and I think if he causes any problems at all, like, that rope gets dragged or something and he drowns. I can't remember, but yeah, then we get to see like basically they're kind of like this weird fisherman type. They're wearing like a lot of like plaid and stuff like that, and they're all like burnt from the sun, I guess. They all look burnt up. They look really grisly. And what was interesting about like that is that none of them can make any noise as well. So a lot of the time, like a lot of it's silent. So again, body language is definitely needed in that. And of course, the way they got around that is Cillian Murphy, like he was taught in the beginning of the film how to say dive in sign language because Millicent taught him. So basically, yeah, like how to use the dive, and then that's what he did. He told her to dive using the sign language. So she jumps in the water. He causes a lot of noise, and the creature comes out of nowhere and kills them all. And then they get a hold of a boat and they go to the island, and we see more people there. And what's really weird is they're all talking, they're all listening to records and stuff like that, and it's really, really kind of bizarre. Considering you had a film and a half where it's if you make any sort of sound, you're dead. And to see like, and even Cillian Murphy was like, when he first sees this civilization, like he couldn't believe it. Like they were all just making a racket, you know what I mean? And they didn't have a care in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course when I mentioned a death angel, like one of them tried to get on a boat and drowned. One of them did get on a boat, and somehow the boat managed to drift to the island.
Mm-hmm.
So when Cillian Murphy figured that out, he saw the boat. He thought, "Oh shit!" Like he starts running to the settlement. He's like, "Get inside, get inside!" And then you see the creature just like whacking people, throwing them about like they were nothing. And then the way that storyline culminates is they go to the radio station where they've been sending out the signal. Because what Mercer had in mind, I believe, is to use the feedback to like across the country,
Mm-hmm.
so everyone can use it as a weapon against the creatures. And then and then at this point, this coincides with this second storyline, which is between Emily Blunt and the youngest son. Like, although Emily Blunt tries to kill the character, the creature, she wasn't successful,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole time the son and the baby have been in that chamber. But the problem was the way the chamber works is you have to have a towel where you seal it, so it doesn't fully shut, so you can get out again from the inside. He forgets that, so he seals it shut. And when he realizes it's running out of oxygen, he couldn't get out, and he had to steal the baby's oxygen and pass it between them just to survive. Because if he goes out, the creature's already there, because the ceiling came through.
Yeah.
And then they're both in the chamber at this point, and they're like the creature's just like he's got his gangly arms. He's like scratching around, cutting up the woman's leg. You know what I mean? And then coincide the Millicent's character uses the earpiece into the microphone in the radio station, and it starts going mental. And then she starts getting closer to it, and then the son was listening to the radio, and he had the amp that his sister made. So he starts using that feedback to lure back that creature. And then what was really cool at the end of the film is both of the kids was pushing the creature back, and both killing them at the same time. And to me, that was really cool because you see, like in the beginning, it was a lot about to do with the adults, like do their best to help the kids survive. But now it shows that they're both ready to, that they're like the future, like they give hope for the rest of the world. And I think and they've mentioned that there could be a third one, like a third Quiet Place. And I reckon if it was made, it's going to be centered around those two kids specifically. I think Emily Blunt will be removed at some point. She'll probably get murdered as well, and it's going to be them and the baby.
Yeah.
And they're gonna like basically, I think they're gonna push the creatures back by using the feedback, by sending that signal all throughout the country and just like getting rid of them completely. And yeah, sorry, that was a massive explanation, wasn't it? That was a long. Basically, that's the whole story. There really wasn't much. I mean, basically, it's just other than adding like like different types of civilization. There's some that have become like rogues, and then there's some that have actually got to live a normal life, albeit temporarily. And the use of sound again, they were very creative with that. It's really just it wasn't a necessary sequel, and in fact, the director, John, he didn't actually want to write the sequel. He just said, look, I don't want to do it because like from an audience perspective, he was like, well, the first one was so good, like why would you need another one?
Yeah.
So the story behind that was they wanted, the producer I think said like, can you give us like an outline, so at the very least we can send that to the next director and then we have something to work with. So as he was writing that, halfway through he was like, no, I'm definitely directing this, and then that's how it came to be. But honestly, I think if you've seen the first one, I mean the second one is great, don't get me wrong, like if you want more of the same, there's nothing wrong with that. It's still a great film, they've done it really well. It just wasn't necessary. Like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's that kind of thing. So with that, I would give the film like maybe like a 7. Really, because again, it's and the third one's probably going to be more of the same, but they'll try and make it a little bit different. But yeah, so that's so that's the whole story of the second one. So there you go. But to be honest, like again, there wasn't really much new that they've done with it, except for like adding a little bit more to the lore, which I don't see how they're going to do in the third one. But that's not our problem. It's John's and the cast and the team and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so I really if you haven't seen A Quiet Place, the first one, I really really recommend it. Especially, to be honest, I think it's a good starter horror for a lot of people who want to get into the horror genre. I think that's a really good place to start.
It's not too gruesome as well, which I kind of liked. The fact that it's not as gruesome as other horror movies.
It doesn't depend on gore. It depends on the moments. It's the quiet between the horror, I think, is the most important step. It's really easy to watch. It's really easy to get into, and it's just very refreshing because a lot of horror films, they don't really try. Like it's always like some regurgitation of something else. With A Quiet Place, I find it's quite that it's based on old, like really really old films, but it's still relatively like a refreshing idea in horror genre. So I really recommend The Quiet Place. And if you want more of the same, you can always watch the sequel, albeit it's not necessary. And I also really recommend. I was just before recording this, I was actually watching John Krasinski going through like the opening of the second one. It's like it's a Vanity Fair video, and he's like basically going through the like scene by like little things here and there that you didn't pick up on before of the opening of the second one, which to be honest, I think the opening was probably the best thing out of that film, to be honest. Maybe. It's definitely up there. But yeah, so was there anything else you wanted to add at all, B?
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, and I'm actually impressed that I managed to talk this long when I'm absolutely fatigued. I forgot what it was like to talk so much. My throat's like I feel like I got little death angels in my throat, like scratching on the inside. It's really painful. All right, so that's our welcome back episode. I think we're back into the groove of things now. So I think another thing I want to bring up as well, like in terms of scheduling.
Yeah.
What me and Beeve decided is that it will be bi-monthly now. We mentioned before it was bi-weekly, but of course this is a new thing that we're doing, so we're not really used to what it's like to kind of do a podcast. Like, this is still relatively new to us, and we find that with our other projects, like, I was getting really stressed out because I'm just really worried about getting things done for the podcast, and then I don't have time to do anything else. So with this scheduling, we should be able to have more time to research, which I want more of, and it also just gives us, I mean, like, recording and editing doesn't really take that long unless it's like I want to do something special with it. It's just a research, I find, like, giving time to do that. And then you have more content in the episode to talk about. But yeah, we're going to be bi-monthly, so that still could theoretically mean we could have an episode or two per month. It's more likely an episode per month because we just want... Personally, I want more quality than quantity now.
Yeah, I feel like that is definitely important, that we can give you kind of better quality over just us talking nonsense for an hour. I think the quality is far more important than turning that out every week.
That should be the name of our podcast, Talking Nonsense for an Hour.
It's an hour.
No. I mean, but that's what I say, like, if we didn't... Because we were able to watch the films and I was able to kind of do a little bit of digging up on it, so I can give you all the little bits of trivia and stuff like that, because that, if I hear a podcast, that's what I want to hear. So I think, yeah, we'll wrap it up now. We've just gone a little over an hour. We've done pretty well. I think maybe, we haven't discussed this, but maybe the next episode can be the art one, like the manga one that we were talking about.
Yeah,
maybe that could be
I
it.
would really love that, just because I think that the reason we've needed so much time to research the manga and anime side of things is that it is... Well, we're focusing on manga now, but manga is vast, and there's so much amazing work done. It's really hard to kind of pare it down to just like one or two feature works to talk about. So I think it might end up being something that we revisit again and again and again, but it's just working out like we can talk about for you guys for the first one.
Yeah, because as I said before, it's like with the found footage one, we'll probably do another episode on that, like a follow-up at some point. Yeah, I mean, even talking about Junji Ito, who... This is kind of like a snippet. Like, I'm going to be talking about Junji Ito because he's like the Stephen King of the manga industry. That he's done so much work, and there's just so much you could talk about.
I'm going to be honest, we could probably dedicate like a 3-parter to him alone.
Oh, we all love a multi-part in a podcast. Yeah, so that's something we'll discuss in our own time, and that's something we'll research, but that's something you can look forward to. You could always, if anyone listening out there, like, if you want to like send us recommendations and stuff like that, what we're going to really try and promote. I think we're going to need to discuss how we can get this. I want to reach the world now. You know what I mean? So we'll discuss that as well. But yeah, anyone out there who's listening, if you want to recommend anything to us, like manga-wise, or ideas for episodes, I mean, we've got enough for months, really, but it's always good to have more ideas.
And if we know what you want, then that helps us as well.
That's true, yeah. So if you want us to specifically talk about something, and then the more demand for it, the more likely it's going to happen. So that's it. I'm Rhett. There you go. Pause. Yeah, I thought I'd just in case, because we talked so long, you might want to hear our names one last time. And that's the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night, or morning, or afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. Just have a good one.